I never thought a funeral would be the moment my daughter finally showed her teeth. There I was, adjusting the corner of my husband's flag-draped coffin, his Navy photo standing proud on the easel, when Natalie leaned in, her perfume too strong, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You won't get a single dollar, you old hag." Then she smiled. Not at me, at the mourners behind us. Grief draped across her like a tailored coat as she turned to sob against her husband's shoulder. I watched her pat my grandson's head like the perfect daughter. But I heard her, clear as day. And so did the mic clipped to the pulpit. I blinked. Once. Twice. My fingers curled around the coffin edge like it could hold me up. I felt ice crawl through my gut. That's what betrayal feels like. Not fire, not fury, just a sudden, frozen stillness where love used to live. Pastor Riley had offered to live stream the service for Jack's old Navy buddies upstate. Said it was simple, barely noticeable. I'd agreed without a thought. I didn't know they'd left the mic live between eulogies. Didn't know that somewhere, maybe online already, was a recording of my daughter spitting venom beside her father's body. I stayed silent, smiled even. Let the tears slide quietly. Natalie made a performance of hers, tugged tissues from her sleeve, trembled just so. I almost believed her myself, if not for the words still echoing in my skull. "You won't get a single dollar." She thinks the will favors her. She thinks he didn't update it after what she did last year. She thinks I'm too soft, too weak, too broken. Let her think it. Let her laugh at the widow in the guest room. Let her keep the house warm with lies and mortgage flyers. Let her text her boyfriend about, quote, cashing in on the old man's guilt trip, because she didn't see what I found tucked in his sock drawer the night before. She didn't notice that the live stream's mic light blinked red when she hissed that insult. And she sure as hell doesn't know what's in the safe under my side of the bed. But she will. 2 weeks from now, she'll sit across from a lawyer, smirking with that same condescending grin. And when he reaches the words, "I leave everything to my beloved wife Maureen," she'll go pale. Because Natalie always liked to perform. But this time, I'm the one who wrote the final act. 2 hours after the funeral, I sat in the guest room of my own house, whispering into my phone's voice recorder, because I needed a place to put my thoughts before they drowned me. My name is Maureen Cantrell. I'm 68 years old. Widow as of this morning. Jack died the way he lived. Quiet, proud, and worried more about everyone else than himself. I miss him. God help me, I miss him already. My voice cracked somewhere between Jack and Miss. I could hear it shake in the playback. But in the background, something else played too. The faint, tinny echo of laughter. Natalie's voice. Downstairs. Just loud enough to make out. Finally ours. Yeah, no more tiptoeing around. She was on speakerphone, laughing, about the house being hers. I pressed pause and sat there, still in my funeral dress, staring at the pink floral wallpaper. I hadn't changed since 1983. My husband's body hadn't even been laid to rest in the ground yet. I looked around the room that had become my exile. A folded cot with a throw blanket. One lamp. A drawer that stuck halfway open. After Jack's first fall, Natalie insisted we move everything downstairs. Said it was, quote, for convenience, but she never moved herself. Only me. The way she spoke to me shifted around then, too. Less, Mom, more, Maureen. I chalked it up to stress. Then denial. Then routine. She said things like, "You've done enough. Let us take it from here." I wanted to believe her. I let her take things. Now I see what she was really doing. Jack and I bought this home in 1979. Raised 2 kids here. Hosted birthdays, anniversaries, even Jack's Navy buddies once for a chili cook-off that destroyed the lawn. That yard still has a burn patch in the corner where Tom Mulligan's propane tank tipped over. I built a life here. And now I was hiding in a room with 2 suitcases and a guest towel that didn't match the others. I opened the safe in the closet, just to see, I told myself. Just to breathe. The documents were all still there. Mortgage deed in both our names. Jack's discharge papers. Our wedding license. His will. The envelope was still sealed. I didn't open it. Not yet. I wasn't ready to confirm or deny the last thing he ever wrote about our life together. Not after hearing Natalie's voice through the floorboards. Instead, I picked up my phone again, pressed record. I think she's planning something. Maybe already started. But if you're hearing this, then I'm not going crazy. I'm just finally ready to see it. The morning after the funeral, I sat at the kitchen table with my old planner open, flipping pages like they still meant something. Monday, garden beds. Wednesday, read with Ava, 3:15 at the center. Sunday, beef stew. Carla brings the rolls. Little things. Ordinary things. My life in blue ink. It used to feel full, didn't it? I'd fill this house with smells and stories, wipe little hands after cookies, teach neighborhood kids to read. I used to bake banana bread just to have a reason to see folks smile. That planner was my proof of existence. Natalie walked in mid-page turn, looked down at the binder like it was a joke. "You still use that thing?" she said, not even pretending to be gentle. "We've got a shared Google Calendar now, Maureen." Maureen? Not Mom. She poured herself coffee and walked out like I wasn't there. I looked around my kitchen, and saw what had changed. The walls were still the same faded yellow I picked out when Jack was alive, but now there were gray IKEA bins labeled snacks and meal preps, and magnets for places I hadn't been invited to. Jamaica, San Diego Zoo, some winery in Oregon. Natalie only came to Sunday dinners when her checking account needed CPR. And when she did come, it was always with some story about how tight things were, how hard it was keeping up with bills after all they'd done for me. As if Jack and I hadn't kept this roof over everyone's head for 40 years. As if I hadn't still been paying into the house out of my pension. I went to the cupboard and pulled out the binder I kept with recipes and flyers, neighborhood events, newsletters from the Literacy Center, old grocery lists. Tucked in the back was my ledger. I flipped through the numbers. Not guesses, not stories. Receipts. $1, $800 a month into the house. Every month. For 6 years straight. From my librarian pension. Directly wired in. Quietly. Faithfully. Like a fool. Natalie's voice floated in again. This time from the living room. She was on the phone again. Joking. "No, it's fine. Once the account clears, we can talk upgrades. The old lady thinks the house is still split." I felt something twist in my gut. Like a door slamming shut. Not grief. Not sadness. Clarity. This wasn't just disrespect. This was a setup. A rewriting of history, while my name was still warm in the guest book. I reached for my coffee, sipped it slowly, and stared out the window at the garden beds I'd built myself. She thinks I'm done. She has no idea I've just started. The attic smelled like dust, insulation, and old lies. 2 days had passed since the funeral. Natalie was gone for the afternoon. Some appointment she vaguely waved off. I waited until the garage door rumbled shut before climbing the attic ladder. My knees complained. My back warned me not to push it, but my hands moved with purpose. Flipping back the corner of the quilt box where I kept what Natalie called the sentimental junk. That's where I found it. A photo from her college graduation, framed in cheap black plastic. She stood there in her blue gown, her smile wide, holding up her diploma like she'd won something more than debt. Jack and I were on either side of her. My hand was on her back. Jack's face was half-shadowed. The sun had caught us just wrong. I looked happy. He looked tired. I turned the frame over and found the dedication card tucked behind the matting. To the 2 people who shaped me. Thank you, Dad, for your strength. And thank you, Marin, for your patience. Marin. Not Maureen. She misspelled my name in her own dedication. I laughed. Loud. Not because it was funny, but because the hurt landed like a slap, and my body didn't know what else to do. I wiped my eyes and kept going. Deeper into the box. Old letters, programs, paperwork. I opened a manila envelope I hadn't touched in years. Inside were Natalie's student loan forms. The originals. I'd co-signed them back in 2008. She'd begged, she'd cried. She said no one else would help her. And I did. Of course I did. Like a mother should. Only now I saw it clearly. The loans were in my name as guarantor. I pulled out a crumpled printout. A Sally Mae statement. Final notice from 2016. Defaulted. I pressed my hand to my chest and sat back on the attic floor. All those years of strange credit dings. The card that got denied at Carla's birthday lunch. The time the IRS sent me a question about unreported financial support. I thought it was a fluke, but she'd been dragging my name through the mud for over a decade. I kept digging. I found a half-open envelope from Aunt June, Jack's older sister. The handwriting slanted hard to the right, like it always did when she was angry. You've got to open your eyes, Maureen. That girl's got attitude that'll eat your kindness for lunch. Don't say I didn't warn you. She saw it before I did. We all did, in flashes. But I kept making excuses. She was young, she'd grow up, she'd had it rough. No, she'd had it easy. And she took everything I gave her and called it expected. Well, not anymore. I stood slowly, photos still in hand. I looked at that young woman in the cap and gown, all teeth and future. She may have borrowed my name, my money, my kindness, but she wasn't borrowing anything else. By October 10th, the dining table had disappeared under a sea of manila folders. I'd labeled every one. I wanted it to be undeniable, not just for the court, not just for the lawyer I hadn't hired yet, but for myself. Because after years of being told I didn't really contribute, I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. Natalie had been telling people I was a drain, a burden, just there, like a houseplant or a couch that never got sat on, that I brought nothing to the table. Well, here was the damn table. Receipts from when I paid off her medical debt, $7, $200 after her appendix burst. Email confirmations from the car dealership. My name on the down payment for her first Civic. Wire transfers, $600 a month for nearly 5 years toward her condo mortgage in Galveston. Total, $46,900. All from me. All unasked for repayment. All tucked quietly into her life so she could feel like she was doing it on her own. So she could still call herself independent while cashing my checks. I had the statements from Credit Union of Texas printed and stapled, each line circled in red pen. My handwriting, neat, exact. Librarian hands don't shake, not when the work matters. I opened my laptop and pulled up a folder I'd named simply Care Ledger. Inside was every transfer ID, every PDF, every thank you email, few and far between. One of them was from 2013. Natalie had written, "I'll pay you back the second I get my tax return." She never did. The next email was a request for help with a minor credit card hiccup. I pushed the laptop aside and stared out the window, hands pressed together like a prayer. What was I praying for? A different past? A better daughter? Maybe just the strength to stop pretending I'd been wrong about her. The truth was harder than anything I'd ever shelved or cataloged. The truth was that Natalie had built her entire adulthood with bricks I paid for. And now she wanted to evict me from the house I'd held together with casseroles and pension checks and silent sacrifices. I took a deep breath, then pulled a Post-it note from the drawer, wrote one word on it in block letters. Enough. I stuck it to the top of the folder stack. Then I picked up the photo from the attic, the one with my name misspelled. I pressed it gently, face down, into the shredder. The table didn't just have proof now. It had a purpose. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor in Jack's old study when I found it, tucked between a stack of crossword puzzle books and his worn copy of The Things They Carried. A crumpled legal form, folded once, then again, like someone wanted it forgotten. Durable power of attorney, dated February 22nd, 2025. Jack's signature. I stared at it like it was a snake in the drawer. My pulse tapped against my throat. It looked official. Too official. Natalie's name was right there, typed in bold, appointing Natalie M. Cantrell as full financial and medical decision-maker, effective immediately in case of illness, incapacity, or absence of mental clarity. I remembered that month. Jack had come home from the hospital after pneumonia, weak but recovering. He couldn't remember what he'd eaten that morning, but he could recite Civil War trivia like a history teacher. He was tired, not incapable. Back then, I asked Natalie what she'd had him sign. She smiled like I was being dramatic. "Oh, just a form so I can order his meds online." Relax, Maureen. Relax, Maureen. God, how many times had she said that? Like my instincts were just clutter, like I was some nervous old lady who didn't understand how things worked now. I never saw that paper again, until now. I held it in shaking hands, the memory of that hospital day flashing back like a cheap horror movie. Jack had been lying in that sterile room, IV tubes in his arm, pale and out of breath. Natalie had waltzed in with a clipboard and a smoothie, talking fast, smiling wide. "Just one more signature, Dad. This is for the discharge stuff. They need it for the pharmacy." He didn't even read it. He trusted her. And so did I. Back then. I laid the form flat on the floor and smoothed it out, eyes scanning every clause. She'd had him sign over everything. The authority to act on his behalf financially. Access to accounts, to property, to medical decisions. Even mine. Because in Texas, once you gain medical authority for one spouse in a joint household, you can make support decisions for the whole damn household if the paperwork lines up right. I swallowed hard. She'd known what she was doing. This wasn't about his medicine. It was a foundation. A silent, legal landmine, planted when no one was watching. Probably the first brick in whatever scheme she thought I was too tired to notice. Well, I saw it now. I reached for my phone and took a clear photo of the form, both sides. Saved it under the folder marked Defense. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in my red accordion file, marked Early Warnings. I'd let my guard down once. I wouldn't do it again. By October 11th, the weather had cooled, but the house was heating up in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. I was in the garden pulling weeds when I heard her voice on the porch. Loud. Careless. No idea I was within earshot behind the hydrangeas. She was on speakerphone again. Her favorite way to pretend privacy didn't apply when she had something vile to say. She still thinks the will favors her. Can you believe that? The old bat actually thinks Dad left her everything. My chest went tight. My hands clenched around a trowel. I didn't breathe. She laughed. Let her live in the fantasy a few more days. Once the check clears, I'm calling Debbie to get the place listed. I'm not letting this rot box drag me down. Drag her down? This house raised her. These garden beds grew her tomatoes and birthday balloons. That back door held her height chart in faded pencil from age 6 to 17. I backed up, one step at a time, heart thudding in my ears. Inside, I didn't cry. Not this time. I just walked to the hutch and pulled out my phone. Went to garden clip. Hit record. Natalie's voice, right there through the window. She's too weak to fight me. I'm doing her a favor. She just doesn't know it yet. Save. Label. Porch recording. She didn't even hide it anymore. No more fake warmth. No more passive digs. This was open war. The kind where she assumed I was already defeated. Like I'd lie down quietly in the dust while she swept me out with the leaves. I sat at the dining table for over an hour after that. Not to cry. To focus. I pulled the receipts back out. Labeled the files better. Rearranged them by date, then by category. Housing. Medical. Loans. Unreturned. I added a new section. Recorded statements. This wasn't just hurt feelings anymore. This was financial fraud. Verbal abuse. Possibly even coercion. If she was planning to sell the house behind my back, I'd need more than memories and good intentions to stop her. I looked out the window at the porch where she'd made her call. She thought I couldn't hear her. Thought I was too frail to matter. Thought I'd go quietly. But every insult, every whisper, every casual cruelty, I was saving them. Stitching them together like thread through fabric. When the time came, I wouldn't raise my voice. I'd raise the evidence. 2 days later, I came back from the community center to find strangers walking through my living room. A woman in stilettos was gesturing toward the fireplace. rattling off terms like open concept potential and natural lighting. A young couple stood beside her, holding a glossy flyer. I froze in the doorway, my tote bag sliding off my shoulder. "Can I help you?" I asked, voice cold, precise. The woman turned, eyes blinking like I'd interrupted her own open house. "Oh, you must be the tenant. Natalie didn't tell me anyone would be home." "Tenant. I'm not a tenant," I said, stepping fully inside. "I'm the homeowner." Her smile faltered. "I was told the property belonged to Natalie Cantrell, that she was preparing to list it." She held out the flyer. It had my house on the front, my azaleas, my porch swing, my name nowhere. "Ready to close," it said. "No tenants. Vacant at transfer." I turned, and there she was. Natalie, coming in from the garage like it was a normal Tuesday. "Maureen," she said with faux cheer. "I was going to tell you. This is Debbie. She's just helping me assess value. You know, for Dad's estate." "I'm not dead," I said flatly. Debbie's eyes widened. She stepped back, mumbling something about needing to make a few calls. The couple shuffled awkwardly toward the door, muttering apologies. I walked straight to the dining room, yanked open the drawer with the household files, and pulled out the deed. Jack and I were joint owners, survivorship clause intact. "Let me guess," I said, holding it up. "You thought you could just say the will gave it to you, forge a revocation of this clause, and sell it before probate even starts?" Natalie crossed her arms. "Dad didn't want you stuck here alone. He told me that. He made arrangements." "Oh, I know about the arrangements," I said, my voice low. "But they're not the ones you think." Her smile cracked, just a flicker. She hadn't expected resistance. Not from the woman who used to leave birthday cards under her pillow. Not from the one who kept the peace during every holiday, no matter how many digs she made about my dusty meatloaf. She turned and followed Debbie out without another word. But not before I snatched the flyer from the couple's hands. The listing had a RE/MAX logo. Debbie Flores. Her card was still on the table. I slid it into a new folder I'd started that morning. Fraud attempts real estate. Let her keep playing her game. But from now on, every move she made I'd meet her with one of my own, and I wasn't bluffing. The next day, she handed me a pink envelope like it was a wedding card. Smiling too wide, voice too sweet. "I talked it over with Kevin," she said, sliding it across the kitchen counter like a tip. "We think this is what's best." Inside was $500 in cash, folded crisp like she'd just pulled it from the ATM. Underneath the bills, a one-way bus ticket to Kerrville. "To stay with Carla," she added, as if we were chatting about dinner reservations. "Just until everything is finalized with the estate. It's charity, Maureen. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Charity." Like I was some washed-up stranger begging outside the HEB. I held the ticket in my palm and stared at it so long, the ink began to blur. I'd known Carla for 30 years. Jack's cousin. A sweet woman, too soft for conflict. She lived in a modest house with 5 cats and chronic arthritis. Natalie hadn't spoken to her in at least a decade. "You already packed my suitcase?" I asked. She shrugged, casual as a shrug can be. "It's in the foyer. Thought I'd make it easier." I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I just nodded once, picked up the envelope, and walked to my bedroom, my exile, and sat on the edge of the bed. And I cried. Not quiet, noble tears. Ugly ones. The kind you can't stop once they start. The kind that make your body shake with rage and humiliation. Because I wasn't just grieving Jack anymore. I was grieving the version of myself that believed family always came through in the end. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Carla. "Maureen? Sweetheart, Natalie said you were coming to stay with me. Honey, why didn't you call me yourself? I would never turn you away, but I didn't know they'd done that to you. I'm so sorry. Please call me." Her voice cracked near the end. I could hear it. She was crying too. I saved the voicemail, labeled it displacement. Then I stood, walked to the closet, and pulled down the fireproof lockbox Jack had tucked away on the top shelf. He'd told me once, "This box is only for if something goes really wrong." You'll know when. I never wanted to know when, but I knew now. I placed the envelope, cash and all, into the folder labeled Forced Relocation, slid it into the box alongside the porch recording, the forged listing, the power of attorney. I took a deep breath. Whatever Natalie thought she'd buried with Jack, she just unearthed something else entirely. I wasn't leaving. I was gathering. That night, when the house was dark and Natalie's car was gone from the driveway, I pulled the fireproof lockbox onto the bed. My hands were steady now. I hadn't opened it since Jack died. I told myself I wasn't ready, that it could wait. But tonight? Tonight wasn't about grief. Tonight was about clarity. I entered the code he made me memorize 20 years ago. Our anniversary followed by the year we met. 062577. Click. Inside, neatly packed, were folders, labeled in Jack's handwriting. I hadn't seen it in months. Just the sight of it made my chest ache. But one envelope was different. He'd sealed it, taped it shut. On the front, he'd written, "In case she turns." I stared at those 4 words for a long time. I knew who she was, and so did he. I opened it with slow fingers, careful not to tear the corners. Inside was a letter, dated September 2024, and a certified, notarized copy of an updated will. Jack's will. His real will. I sat there, reading each line, each clause, each paragraph like it was scripture. My breath caught when I saw it. To my wife, Maureen Cantrell, I leave full control of all property, accounts, and holdings. She is named sole executor. Any attempt to challenge this will shall result in full forfeiture by the claimant. There was more, so much more. Language about revoking all previous powers of attorney. Language about Natalie's financial behavior. Language that showed Jack had seen it too. Her entitlement, her manipulation, her coldness. I love my daughter, but I trust my wife. I pressed the letter to my chest and sobbed, quiet this time. Not from pain, but from release. The knowing. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. Jack had seen it coming, and he'd protected me in the only way he could. At the bottom of the envelope was a business card, Wallace and Hartwell Law. File code 4XW923L, written in Jack's careful print. He'd already filed it. This wasn't a draft. This was real. I tucked the documents into a new folder. Active will, sole executor. Then I made a copy of everything, printed and digital, scanned it to a secure USB, uploaded it to the cloud. By the time Natalie walked back through the front door, I was sitting calmly on the porch, drinking tea, the stars above me cold and bright. She didn't look at me as she walked past, and I didn't flinch, because now I had what she didn't: truth, paperwork, and power. The next morning, I was standing in the Credit Union of Texas lobby before the teller's gate even lifted. A woman in a navy blazer unlocked the front door, blinking like she didn't expect anyone waiting that early. "I need to speak to a branch manager," I said calmly. "Name's Maureen Cantrell. It's urgent, legal, and time-sensitive." She took one look at the folder in my arms, tabbed, color-coded, marked with probate hold request, and didn't ask questions. Manager's name was Julia Lynn. Late 30s, sharp eyes, no nonsense. I liked her immediately. "I need to revoke Natalie Cantrell's power of attorney and freeze all joint accounts tied to my husband, Jack Cantrell, effective immediately," I said as I took a seat in her office. She hesitated. "Do you have documentation of the revocation?" I opened the folder. "Updated will, notarized, filed. Here's the certification. I'm listed as sole executor. And here's a copy of the durable POA Natalie had him sign while he was in recovery, along with medical records showing he was under medication at the time. That's a fraud risk." Her eyes widened just enough to show she understood the stakes. "Give me 5 minutes." She left the room with my documents. I sat in that office, staring at the little bowl of branded mints on her desk, and felt my heart thudding in my ears like a drum beat. My fingers were clenched so tight around my tote strap They were white at the knuckles. When Julia returned, she slid a paper across the desk. Account number 654 to 772. Hold initiated, pending probate verification. Your joint checking account has been frozen, she said. No withdrawals, transfers, or auto debits can be processed. I've also flagged the account for elder protection review. If Natalie attempts access, we're alerted immediately. I exhaled. Not relief. Something deeper. Justice, maybe. She's going to notice, I said. She already has, Julia replied. She turned her monitor slightly toward me. A rejected transaction. Natalie's leased Lexus. Declined. 10:07 a.m. I smiled. I didn't mean to. It just happened. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Natalie. I didn't answer. Then came the text. Why is my lease payment bouncing? What the hell did you do? I took a screenshot. Filed it under a new folder. Immediate financial reaction. I turned back to Julia. Can I get a printed receipt of the hold? Something with your signature? Absolutely, she said, already printing it. Do you want to hand deliver it? Or have me notarize and mail? I looked at her. I'm hand delivering it. She can scream into the wind all she wants. But now she knows. She's not in charge anymore. By October 16th, I was sitting across from attorney Elijah Rowe in a quiet office that smelled like old leather and justice. He looked just like Jack described, graying at the temples, sharp but never hurried, with a voice like polished oak. Wallace and Hartwell had handled Jack's Navy pension paperwork back in the day, but this was the first time I'd sat across from Mr. Rowe myself. I pulled out my folders and laid them one by one across the glass table. Receipts of financial contribution. A copy of Jack's updated will. Power of attorney revocation. Audio clips. Photos. Flyers. The realtor's card. Recordings. Text messages. I've got cloud backups, a USB drive, and 2 printed sets. Mr. Rowe nodded slowly, then gave me a look I hadn't seen in months. Respect. He reviewed everything without rushing. When he got to the will, he tapped the file code at the top. This is the one we filed last September. It supersedes all previous documents. And yes, legally it's bulletproof. I said nothing, just folded my hands and let the silence settle. She doesn't know you have it? He asked. She thinks she buried it with him, I said quietly. She thinks she's already won. He smiled, not smugly, but like a man who's seen this movie before. Well, that's going to make Monday very interesting. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a signed witness list. Jack had made sure the right people were in place when he updated the will. A notary, a bank officer, a Navy buddy, even a junior associate from this very office. Every signature was there. Maureen, Mr. Rowe said, closing the folder, you are the legal executor of Jack Cantrell's estate. The house, the accounts, the vehicles, they are yours. Natalie has no authority to sell, move, or alter anything. If she attempts it, she's not just violating probate, she's committing fraud. I sat back in the chair, the weight of it all pressing in. Not fear, just the enormity of reclaiming what was always mine. He slid me a slim packet. Take this home. It's everything you need to hold the line if she tries anything between now and Monday. I'll prep the formal reading. Bring anyone you want as witness. I nodded. I already have a list. Before I left, I opened my phone and saw a text from Natalie. What are you doing at Dad's lawyer? I took a screenshot. Labeled it under a new folder. Unraveling. Let her panic. By the time she realized I was done playing housemaid and ghost widow, I'd already built the case that would leave her speechless. That night, I sat at my desk, and sent an email with a subject line I never thought I'd type. Witness request, will reading. October 21st at 2 p.m. Attendance confirmed by attorney. Please be present. Recipients. Pastor Riley. Carla. Jack's cousin, my sister in every way that counts. Julia Lynn from the credit union. Me. I always CC myself. It's a habit I picked up when Natalie used to lose things. I stared at the screen a moment, then clicked send. Natalie wouldn't like it. That the reading would happen at Wallace and Hartwell. That I'd made it official. that I wasn't giving her time to stall, twist, or whisper her way out of it. But this wasn't about her anymore. This was about truth finally taking up space. I called Carla first. Her voice cracked before I even finished the sentence. "You're not going alone, Maureen," she said. "I'll be there. Front row." Then, Pastor Riley. He cleared his throat, voice reverent but warm. "I always suspected Natalie wasn't mourning, but I had no idea." He trailed off. Then, "I'll come, and I'll wear my collar." It was the kindest kind of war paint. Finally, I called Julia. I told her I understood if she couldn't come, being from the bank and all. She paused, then said, "I've seen enough sons and daughters try to erase their parents. You're not the first, but I'd be proud to make sure you're the one who wins." I blinked, swallowed hard. "Thank you," I said. When I hung up, I walked to the hallway mirror. The one Natalie always said made the entryway feel too old lady. I stared at my own reflection. 68. Wrinkles around the eyes. Strong jaw. Steady hands. I looked exactly like my mother the day she told my father to stop drinking or leave. Not angry. Not scared. Just done. Natalie had spent the last 6 months convincing the world that I was a silent, shrinking woman. But Monday? She'd faced the version of me that raised 2 kids, buried a husband, and outlived every attempt to erase her. And she'd have to do it with witnesses. I pulled out the packet Mr. Rowe gave me and tucked it into a navy leather folder. Jack's old Navy award binder, the one he never let Natalie touch. I set it by the door. I wanted her to see it. Let her ask what it was. Let her pretend she wasn't already sweating. Monday was coming. The room was booked. The will was filed. The allies were called. Now all that was left was for Natalie to walk in, thinking it was still her show. On October 18th, I sent Natalie a text. Just 12 words. Per Dad's will, reading is Monday. Attendance required or forfeiture assumed. The dots appeared instantly. Those 3 little bubbles of panic. Then her reply came. "Wall, fine. Can't wait to watch you cry." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Clause 7B of Jack's will said it all. Refusal to attend shall constitute voluntary waiver of all claims. I had printed that clause in 14-point bold and paper-clipped it to the top of her packet. She'd get it the moment she sat down. If she sat down. She thought this was still a game. A dramatic little family power scuffle. She hadn't realized the stage lights were on, and the script wasn't hers anymore. I took my tea out to the porch swing that evening, the air crisp, with that first whisper of fall. The oak tree in the yard had started dropping leaves, golden and dry, the kind that crunched under Jack's boots every year like clockwork. I could almost hear him. "You always did hold your cards too close, Mo." Not this time. This time, I'd played every move in silence, but Monday would be loud. Inside, the navy leather folder sat zipped and ready. Elijah had prepped a full attendee packet for each person. Pastor Riley, Carla, Julia, and me. 4 copies of the will. Timeline summaries, statement of accounts, recorded transcriptions. It wasn't just a reading, it was an exposure. That night, I sat on my bed and reread Jack's letter from the fireproof box. His words still hit like they were written yesterday. "If you're reading this, Maureen, then I trust you've already survived the worst of her. You always were the strong one." I ran my fingers over his signature. The strong one. Funny, isn't it? How they make you feel invisible when you're quiet, and then shocked when you raise your voice. Natalie always mistook my silence for surrender. She forgot who taught her how to tie her shoes, who stayed up sewing dance costumes when she didn't make the team, who sat in the ER while she cried over a broken wrist and whispered, "I'll always be here." She forgot that here wasn't just a place, it was a person. And that person had stopped waiting to be respected. I wasn't asking anymore. I was arriving, with documentation, support, and nothing left to lose. Let Natalie laugh now. She wouldn't be laughing at 2:10 p.m. on Monday. The night before the reading, I couldn't sleep. I sat at Jack's desk with the will in front of me, my glasses off. the words blurring into ghosts. For a moment, I wanted to tear it up. Not out of fear, out of grief. Because this paper, this proof, meant the war between me and my daughter was real. No misunderstanding. No hope left to fix what we'd broken. I whispered her name, Natalie, just to hear how it sounded in the quiet. It didn't sound like my little girl anymore. It sounded like a stranger I'd once loved too much. I wondered if winning would feel like losing all over again. At 2:10 p.m. on October 21st, Natalie burst into the Wallace and Hartwell boardroom like she was still the star of the show. 10 minutes late. No apology. Fake tears already in her eyes, and a friend trailing behind her. A tall woman in a stiff gray blazer and courtroom heels, clearly brought in to intimidate. Natalie's voice cracked just enough to sound rehearsed. "I'm sorry. I was just so emotional I lost track of time," she said, dabbing the corner of one eye with a tissue that looked suspiciously unused. Attorney Rowe didn't flinch. "We began without you. The will reading is underway. Please take a seat." Her friend leaned over and whispered something. Natalie nodded like they were preparing to take the stand. Then she turned to the room, her voice rising with self-righteous grief. "I just want it on the record that I believe my mother manipulated my father in his final days. He wasn't in a clear state of mind. She had access to him while he was medicated." The air in the room tightened. Carla shifted beside me. Julia crossed her arms. Pastor Riley said nothing, but his lips pressed into a thin, unimpressed line. Rowe didn't even blink. "Would you like to present evidence of this claim?" Natalie held up a folded piece of paper with dramatic flair. "A codicil, handwritten, dated April. My father updated his wishes and left the estate to be shared equally." She looked at me with smug victory, her friend smiling just behind her. Rowe took the paper without hesitation, opened it, scanned, then placed it gently on the table. "Forgery," he said flatly. Natalie's smile faltered. "This was printed on Staples brand resume paper using a template that hasn't been in circulation since 2017. The ink on this signature is inconsistent with the one on file. And the notary listed is fictitious. We verified it this morning." Natalie turned red. "You're saying my father's wishes don't matter?" "I'm saying your version of his wishes is fabricated." Her friend shifted uncomfortably, already sensing they'd walked into a room prepared for truth, not theater. Rowe placed the real will in front of her, open to Clause 4D. "Any disputes or challenges to this document by the named beneficiary shall result in full forfeiture of inheritance." She stared at the line like she couldn't read it. Then her face changed. Not sorrow, not even anger, fear. Because the one thing Natalie never counted on was a version of me who planned, a version of me who prepared. She thought I'd crumble. Instead, I came with witnesses, with recordings, with the original document, Jack's words in black ink and legal seal. "You came to watch me cry," I said quietly, "but it looks like you'll be doing that for both of us." Attorney Rowe cleared his throat, opened the original will, and began reading aloud, calm, steady, unshakable. "I, Jack Raymond Cantrell, being of sound mind and full clarity, do declare this to be my final will and testament." The room went still. Natalie sat rigid in her chair, her fake lawyer friend now staring a little too long at the leather grain of the conference table. Rowe kept reading. "To my daughter, Natalie M. Cantrell, I leave the memory of a childhood provided with sacrifice and love. I hope she finds peace." I saw Natalie blink. "To my wife, Maureen Cantrell, who has stood by me in war and in peace, in debt and in health, I leave all property, accounts, assets, and decisions of estate. She is named sole executor, with full authority." The next line made her physically recoil. "Any challenge to this will by a listed or unlisted party shall result in immediate disinheritance." Pastor Riley sat straighter. Carla pressed my hand. Julia Lynn nodded slowly, her expression unreadable but satisfied. Natalie's face drained of color, as if someone had pulled the power cord on her performance. "That's not fair," she hissed under her breath. Attorney Rowe raised an eyebrow. "Fair isn't always what's written in the law, but in this case, it is." She stood abruptly, pointing toward me. "She manipulated him. She kept me out of the house. She made him scared. You think this is what he really wanted?" I didn't even flinch. I reached for the folder in front of me, pulled out a printed photo of Jack holding up the very will she was now screaming about, his signature visible, the date marked, the Navy mug still on the table beside him. Carla passed it across. Rowe laid it down in front of Natalie. "This photo was taken by Mr. Cantrell himself. We have metadata, location, timestamp, witness." She didn't speak. Because there was nothing left to say, I let the silence stretch. Then I spoke, calm and clear. "Your father knew who you'd become, and he protected me from it." Pastor Riley gave a small nod, almost like a prayer. Rowe closed the folder and folded his hands. "This meeting is now concluded. The terms of the will be filed with probate this afternoon. Any further attempts to disrupt proceedings will be reported as fraud." Natalie sank back into her chair, cheeks blotched, eyes wide. No applause, no curtain call, just a quiet room full of people who now knew the truth. For the first time in weeks, I felt the floor solid beneath me. She had tried to erase me, but instead, I had made her invisible. She was halfway out the boardroom when I said it. "Before you go, Natalie, one more thing." She froze in the doorway. Her fake lawyer friend had already slinked into the hall, pretending to check emails. I reached into my Navy folder, the one Jack used to call my vault, and slid a single sheet across the conference table. A printout from Jack's checking account. Withdrawal, $14, 200 date, October 7th, 2025, the day after he died. Her hand twitched on the doorknob. "You used his debit card less than 24 hours after he passed," I said, voice even. "Online transfer to a personal PayPal. Funds labeled vacation deposit. Care to explain where you were going?" She turned slowly, her face hardening like clay left in the sun. "That money was for—" "Stop." My voice was quiet, but sharp enough to slice through the room. "You didn't know the account had a death freeze policy pending probate. That transfer violated federal and state regulations. Jack was no longer a living account holder." Attorney Rowe pulled a folder from his briefcase. "Form 1099-K. Registered to your name. Transfer flag during automatic audit." Julia Lynn leaned forward then, hands folded, voice smooth. "We alerted the probate officer yesterday. They've opened an investigation. Depending on intent, this could be classified as financial elder abuse." Natalie blanched. "The kind of pale that has nothing to do with shock and everything to do with recognition." "You're lucky Maureen filed paperwork before this hit the bank's system," Julia continued. "Otherwise, it would have been your assets frozen this week." Carla, sitting beside me, just shook her head. Quietly, sadly. Natalie's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around like she'd walked into the wrong room by mistake. But she hadn't. This was the room she built, brick by brick, lie by lie. "Every step you took," I said softly, "you left a footprint. I followed them all." Rowe picked up the printout and slid it into the probate violations folder. "This documentation will be submitted to the judge as part of the final estate report." Natalie stared at me like she didn't recognize the woman sitting across from her. Good, because that woman, the one she pushed out of her own kitchen, the one she tried to exile on a bus with a pink envelope, doesn't exist anymore. "I suggest you hire a real attorney," I added, standing. "You're going to need one." Natalie didn't speak again. She just walked out, quieter than she came in, smaller. And for the first time, she looked like the one holding nothing. By sunrise the next morning, October 22nd, the locks had been changed. I stood on the porch in my robe, coffee in hand, watching the locksmith twist his final screw into place. He gave me a quiet nod, handed me a single brass key on a blue tag. I took it. The tag read, "Maureen's home." No more shared space. No more tiptoeing. No more asking permission in my own kitchen. I'd boxed up Natalie's things the night before. Every pair of heels, every bottle of overpriced shampoo, even the throw pillows she insisted were too modern for someone your age, but kept anyway. The boxes were stacked neatly at the edge of the lawn, nothing thrown, nothing destroyed, just removed, a clean break. By 8:05 a.m., a Pasadena PD cruiser pulled into the driveway. Officer Bellamy stepped out, broad-shouldered, polite, and clearly uncomfortable with the whole thing. "Ma'am, I've got the signed notice," he said, handing over the document. "You sure you want me to serve this?" I looked him in the eye. I didn't want any of this, but I'm sure. The paper had 2 stamps. Checkmark Notice of Formal Disinheritance. Checkmark Trespassing Order. Enforceable effective. Immediately, Officer Bellamy walked up to the front door, tacked a copy to the mailbox, then headed toward Natalie's boxes. He placed the envelope on top, weighed it down with a decorative bookend shaped like an ampersand. She always loved that thing. Fitting. She thought life owed her a constant and more, and again. "And what else do you have for me, Maureen?" But this time, the sentence ended with periods. Legal ones. I stepped back inside, closed the door with a satisfying click, and hung my new key on the wall hook by the pantry. A small brass plaque above it read, "Homeowner." Carla arrived with muffins around 10. Pastor Riley came by at lunch to sit quietly on the porch swing. Julia emailed to say the final will filing had gone through without objection. For the first time in months, I breathed without flinching. Natalie would bluster. Probably try to shame me to mutual friends, say I'd turned on her, say I was heartless. Let her. I didn't need to win the public story, I'd won the truth. With files. With proof. With peace. I walked through the house slowly that afternoon, ran my fingers along the banister Jack built, stood in the garden, turned on the old kettle. No one rolled their eyes. No one told me I was in the way. It was mine, all of it. Not by theft, not by manipulation, but because I held the line. And this time, the door behind me stayed locked.